Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen first and then get a slideshow going here. And I need to just swap the okay, can everybody see that slide? The main slide?
But there's also the announcement in the middle of it about the fact that the meeting is being recorded.
That should disappear if you click on it.
Yeah, yeah.
It did.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we see.
All right. Hey, this is our first anniversary of the Political Equilibrium Project. We started this about a year ago, and it was mostly as a meetup group in order to alleviate some of the stress and anxiety around the election time. So anyways, it was a very effective tool for me. I found it somewhat therapeutic in nature to be processing some of this stuff, and also found it therapeutic to see what I could do to make a difference. And doing something felt better than just sort of feeling victim and being a victim to what was going to come about. And I don't know if what we do is makes a difference. Sometimes just talking to people makes a difference. Sometimes looking at things helps alleviate your own anxiety and increase the world's knowledge of how things are and how things can be improved. So in today's agenda, we're doing introductions. I have a Veterans Day thought. We're going to talk a little bit about medical and societal concerns about vaccine hesitancy, learning from bioethics and developing political ethics. I'm going to be doing an overview of a presentation that was done in the 2021 Summer Seminar in Ethics on vaccine hesitancy. Originally, I was planning on playing that presentation, but I found out today working with Zoom that you can't rebroadcast an existing broadcast. There is ways of doing it, but it's very complex. So I'm doing the best that we can with what we have today. Going to have a discussion on vaccine hesitancy and outline ethics publication possibly for the Hastings report, which Bob and I are initiators of writing a publication, and then we will adjourn. So I'm Dave Glickman. I think I know most of you, and we'll be each doing introductions. I like by sharing my political leanings, and we probably should have a left and a right, but I thought a numerical score gives you a sense of reference, but I would say I'm middle left leaning at about a 3.5. I have over 40 years in ethics and quality consulting, working with the Department of Veterans Affairs. My favorite pandemic hobbies have been creating and nurturing and developing this organization, mountain biking and woodworking. And I would say my political pain scale is about 6. That was also my score about 3.5 months after the insurrection. I'm going to be introducing Bob Perlman. I'm going to have him introduce himself. Bob, would you like to introduce yourself?
Take myself off of mute. So I go by Bob, even though it's Robert Allen Perlman, and I'm a retired geriatrician from the University of Washington. I sort of have the current status of professor emeritus. I've worked in ethics since 1985, but relatively recently I was the chief of evaluation for the VA National Center for Ethics in Healthcare. And I've been retired a year now, and what I'm enjoying most these days is reading and engaging in physical activities as opposed to sitting behind a desk. I put myself over on the 2.5 bias disclosure status. in terms of being more to the left, but I'm not quite sure whether that's an adjustment because of the political activities that have happened in the last couple of years, moving leftward as some of the country's moving, rightward. And my moral distress, I mean, it's sort of hidden behind the photos of the participants, but I believe I'm over there at like a 7. I really worry about autocracy and the potential demise of democracy in this country.
And I'd like to have everybody introduce themselves, and if you feel comfortable giving us your bias disclosure and or political pain scale, if you feel comfortable with that. Terry, would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, hi. Yeah. Hi, I'm Terry Halke. I am a nurse. I worked at the VA with Dave and Claudia and Jenny. It's so great to see all of you. It's really nice. I currently work for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services in Seattle as a nurse consultant. I am a federal surveyor serving healthcare providers. And my favorite pandemic hobbies, I would say, is I've taken up running again, which I'm getting back to 2 miles, 3 miles. It's tough after a while, getting back to it. It's like, and then my husband and I have started walking almost when we can early in the morning, maybe about 2 miles in the morning. And that's been really nice, checking out all of our neighborhoods and areas around where we live. For the bias disclosure statement, I would say I'm probably in the middle left. I would say that would be the same for me. And for political pain, moral distress scale, probably a 5. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Bill, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Bill Bellis, and I'm a technical program manager at Oracle. And as far as favorite hobbies, my son got me into cryptocurrency, so I've been kind of really involved in that lately, believe it or not. It's a time consumer though. As far as bias, I would say I'm like right in the middle, just with a little bit to the left. Political pain, God, I'm like a 7.5. I think and it's post-insurrection. I think it's more of what I've seen in local state legislatures. Some of the things I've seen that the majority party has passed that allow you to take away ballots, send your own delegates, right? So just the sanctity of the ballot, I think, has gotten me more like worried about democracy than I ever remember being in my lifetime. Thank you.
Jenny and Jerry?
Hi, yeah, I'm Jenny, and this is my husband, Jerry, and nice to see you VA folks that I remember so well. And it's nice to be retired. I've been retired about 5 years now, and it's great to have the time to really exercise when you want to and get out, take a hike in the middle of the day instead of having to do it early morning like Terry or whatever. So that's a real treat, and stuff we enjoy to try to stay healthy at. I think I'm probably pretty similar to you, Dave, where your bias disclosure and moral distress about a 3.5, middle left leaning, and share the pain many of you others have talked about with the concerns with our democracy potentially failing. January 6th was pretty horrific, and I'm distressed that the Republican Party doesn't seem to want to address that very critical time in our history. And just hoping we can get more productive work out of Congress and get things passed and things moving. So it's a distressing time yet. And then climate change with the meeting going on in Glasgow, I'm not sure if we're going to really make much impact on that. So there's There's a lot of things to worry about.
Yeah.
I'm Jerry. I'm bias disclosure, pretty close to the middle, about 4.5, I think. Political pain, moral distress, I'd say about a 5. It's diminished somewhat. I've been involved in trying to promote ranked choice voting and have found that sort of helps rather than just not do anything kind of similar to what David referred to. My hobby, I'm a retired lawyer, and among other things, and my main hobby has been playing guitar.
And my brother, Steve Glickman.
Hello, yes, my name's Steve Glickman. I work at Boeing. My degree is, well, not my degree, but I'm a decision analyst. I help systematically make decisions, lead project strategies, that sort of thing. Hobbies, running, taking lots of walks with my dog. I was doing improv before the pandemic. That was pre-pandemic. I haven't done that since then. Yeah, I'm about the same as you, Bob. I'm 2.5 and a 7. I'm kind of stressed over the way politics are going. Not very happy that Biden's approval rating is so low, and so yeah. Thanks. That's me.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Claudia?
Hi, everyone. I'm Claudia Rausch. I worked with a bunch of these folks at the VA. It's good to see everyone. I worked in quality and medical staff services. I now work for the Department of Health and Human Services in policy. My favorite pandemic hobbies have been probably home decorating, and I've just been studying an array of different subjects. I've been studying law and litigation and an array of different things. Bias disclosure, I would say I am left-leaning, about a 3, and political pain, moral distress at scale, I would say I'm about a 7.5. Living in the side of the country has definitely opened up my eyes to some of the checks and balances that exist, and some of them that don't exist. And yeah.
Great. Thank you, Claudia.
Mm-hmm.
I think my wife, Donna, is more inclined to be an observer at this point. She's also trying to keep the dog down from making a lot of noise. So we'll give her a pass this time. So I just had a Veterans Day thought. It's really our greatest thanks to those who provided services to America, those that have selflessly defended our democracy. And as voters and consider us activists, we have an obligation also to take action on matters that will preserve our democracy. I think that's really important. So I thought it was a great opportunity for reflection. So some of the things that we're going to talk about today are medical concerns about vaccine hesitancy. A patient may be making decisions based on inaccurate information, which is what we are mostly concerned about. Vaccination may be clinically indicated, but they may be choosing not to get the vaccine because of misinformation or disinformation. So therefore, it undermines the informed consent process and is not truly informed consent. There are societal concerns about vaccine hesitancy, an obligation to protect individuals in society. I don't think that that's talked about enough. And there's an opportunity for learning about from bioethics and developing it into the field of political ethics. So we created a web page on PEP positions. We have one on ranked choice voting, and it doesn't have that much in there, but we did do a presentation on ranked choice voting. That is an important issue that I think we can make a difference in. But this particular web page we just developed last week. It includes 3 different webinars. I only show 2 here, but these 2 are fascinating webinars. The one we're going to talk about today is the one that I attended in the summer seminar on ethics and healthcare at the University of Washington. It was a virtual presentation, and it's a 30-minute presentation, and I wanted to present it tonight, but we're having technological glitches in doing that on Zoom. My understanding is there's other platforms that enable you to do that. But there's another presentation that I think is really very good. It's about ethical approaches to vaccine policies, about mandates, passports, exemptions, including spiritual exemptions and so on. And that's just a really insightful presentation by an attorney who summarized some of the things in there. And the first thing I want to talk about was Doug Opal's presentation. And Bob and I worked together for approximately 20 years together, and we've read each other's works, and I've given him some thoughts on his products, and he's given me thoughts on his products, particularly during ethics consultation. And anyways, I was telling him about Doug Opal's presentation, and it so happens that Bob has worked with Doug Opal. And he was telling me, I think you guys co-published some presentations before, but the presentation that he did this summer was absolutely phenomenal, in my opinion. The key points that he covered was acceptance of the vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy in a certain context, and how to look at it contextually, engaging with patients about COVID-19 vaccines. In the first section, he talked about acceptance of the vaccine. There's varying levels of acceptance. Some of the reasons that people don't accept the vaccine is because it's too new. They're worried about the side effects. They don't trust the government, and they think they don't need it, actually, is the way that that should read. They don't think that they need the vaccine. So in the purple are their primary reasons and or the main reason, and the secondary or major reason that they're not getting the vaccine. And it's really interesting. I heard another interesting presentation from August on the Daily on NPR podcast, interviewing people that were vaccine hesitant. He also presented about vaccine hesitancy within the context of the pre-pandemic milieu, going back all the way to the pandemic flu back in the 1920s. The historic moment that we are in right now, including the political influences, as well as a renewed strain on a social contract. And that strain is being undermined by political influences, which is contaminating the provider-patient relationship. And I'm very concerned about that. And people not even going to providers because they believe they can't trust them. So there's been a lot of undermining of trust. In the engaging with the patients, it's very easy. And the presentation that he did was primarily targeted towards medical providers that are doing informed consent. And there's this tendency to provide reassurance too early, and that should be avoided. He advocates the use of motivational interviewing techniques, which by coincidence was something that I advocated 2 or 3 presentations ago as a means for political interactions. And we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like in just a sec. So engaging with the patient says, I really don't know what's even in these vaccines. A possible response could be by a clinician. The information is just starting to come out. So having these questions is absolutely normal. May I share with you what's in these vaccines and my knowledge of this process? So one of the things that he's doing is asking for permission. The clinician's asking for permission, which provides a level of respect that should be between the patient and the clinician. And that is a great example of motivational interviewing. I used motivational interviewing when I was a substance abuse and vocational rehabilitation counselor for approximately 10 or 12 years. And I found it to be my most effective tool by far in interacting with patients. It's more about getting them to reflect back from their value standpoint where they're at in a certain process, and engaging with them, having a tour or a hike with them in a path that you're moving forward and exploring the options. So what if the reason for refusal is non-rational? And you do have patients that will say, there's no way, doc, no way you're getting me to take something that's activated by 5G. Well, most of us know that 5G is not interrelated with the vaccine. And it's tempting to counteract that argument where it's a very unproductive approach. It's tempting to consider questioning their decision-making capacity and their ability to make this decision, but I would resist this temptation. So in the many years that I've done ethics consultation, it was the most frequent type of ethics consult was the assumption that the person did not have capacity when they were making what we considered inappropriate decisions. And that's not where ethics takes a stance. It's not easy to determine what is clearly non-rational. Human beings are predictably irrational at a baseline anyway. And the law doesn't expect a high standard here when considering claims of capacity based on patient reasoning. So that gets back to the types of ethics consults that we've had. Bob, do you want to say anything about this?
Well, I think you're absolutely correct about this issue of reasoning and having it be really a low bar. Mostly, and we talk in medicine, we talk about decisional capacity versus in legal terms, it's discussions about incompetence. But within medicine, it's really usually anchors to, the ability to express an opinion and a basic understanding of what's being talked about, like a treatment, and the implications and appreciation of short-term and long-term effects of accepting it or rejecting it. And it really rests on those principles, and that it's voluntary, that no one's being coerced.
Mm-hmm. Very well stated. So Bob and I have started the endeavor of a publication, and we're targeting potentially for the Hastings Report, which is a renowned ethics journal. And I think this might give PEP some credibility in terms of moving forward. Once we were able to get a publication, we would have a stance in which to be interviewed and maybe even develop a podcast talking about some of the key points that we're going to look towards in the publication. So I'm going to have Bob share with us some of the things that he and I, and he mostly outlined in things that we've talked about. And we'd like to get your feedback because we're really in the initial stages of developing this publication. So your feedback on things to think about and things to include would be greatly appreciated. And other tie-ins that I want to make eventually is to utilize my brother's decision analysis techniques to assist with this process, and that could be part of the publication. So Bob, do you want to talk about the title and move into the publication outline?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Just to let everyone know, David and I spent way too much time going over this title and then revising it and then revising it. From the concept of, is it really disinformed consent? And is it really meaningful informed consent? And then realizing that that in fact, where we're going is a guide towards respectful and meaningful informed consent discussion. So let me also point out that the following several slides have essentially bullet points. So this is really a very high level outline of some of our thinking to date. So the first bullet is that COVID-19 pandemic has illuminated challenges to healthcare providers and patients about personal health and public health practices. The second is, in a traditional way, healthcare providers recommend to provide counsel to patients serving their fiduciary role in advocating for the best interests of the patient. Next slide. In medicine, the patient, however, has a right to self-determination, and in most situations with decision-making capacity, considers the information about benefits, risks, and alternatives, makes an informed decision to accept or reject what's recommended. Next slide. Under conditions in which a patient or their behavior puts others at risk for serious harm, the healthcare provider also has a duty to protect others. So this has been the case with recommending quarantines and isolation with certain infections, and ensuring that unaware non-patients learn about their potential exposure to certain health-related harms, such as HIV exposure from unprotected sexual contact. Next slide. So the reasons for this opposition to medical advice for vaccination seem to include the following, and this is sort of like a relatively long list, but things that we've heard. Fear about both the short and long-term side effects. Fear about the rushed production of the vaccines. Fear that a chip may be included in the vaccine that tracks something that I would like to remain private. The belief that one's health status, prior health status, will be protective. The belief that that the government is pushing vaccinations, and this represents an intrusion in one's personal liberty. The belief that a prior infection, having had COVID, will be protective against future infections. The belief that the pharmaceutical industries are the primary beneficiaries from the vaccines. The belief that the reports of hospitalizations and deaths are propaganda and manipulative disinformation. And I'm sure there's more. I actually heard one from a relative of mine just today, which is, I'm tired of thinking about this. I've had enough. And this was like, not just to get vaccinated, it's to actually be tested, COVID tested. Next slide. So multiple approaches to promoting vaccination have been attempted with limited success, such as public education, education by leaders, respected individuals in the community, church, political, and education by physicians. The most effective approach to maximizing vaccinations has been targeted mandates, such as with government workers through employment, with loss of work or pay as a consequence of non-compliance. While a proportion of patients feel pressured by all these efforts, healthcare providers too are experiencing moral distress associated with seeing their colleagues get sick and feeling like they are in a battle with some of their patients. Next slide. So the polarization between healthcare providers and patients undermines the therapeutic relationship between doctors and patients, or healthcare providers and patients, and demands an approach that can help both parties. We presume that utilization of motivational interviewing can be a useful tool in exploring individual values as a team, meaning the patient and the healthcare provider, to prevent and/or address underlying differences in values. Having values conversations enhances the patient-provider relationship, regardless of the specific outcome about taking a vaccination or not.
Okay. So actually, I'm going to move back a slide. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to point out in this presentation, Bob and I are mostly thinking about patient-provider, but the publication we're going to have it intended to be used for patient-provider or patient and family member. Now, family members have the ability to influence this process as well, and to have a discussion about it in a way similar to how a provider would have it. And in some cases, the patient may never get to a provider if they don't have a family member that convinces them or encourages them to see a provider. And so we wanted to make this sort of like go-to journal with data and statistics that everybody can rely upon. And as I was processing through this, I realized that one of the things that's been dramatically absent in the informed consent process is the societal obligations. You know, we talk about the risk benefits to the patient, but we never talk about the risk benefits to the society as a whole. And I think that the culture here in the United States is very individually centric. And so therefore, we never even go in that direction. And I think that there's an opportunity to introduce that concept about societal obligations. And one of the ways that they came to a realization was I had a conversation with a friend of mine who had a extremely adverse reaction to her first vaccination, her first COVID-19 Pfizer vaccination. It set her back in her immunological compromised state back almost 10, 20 years ago. So she actually asked me the question. She says, what are we going to be able to do to get to herd immunity? And I said, this is one of the things that I'm working on. You know, the more people we can get vaccinated, the greater chances we have of reaching herd immunity. And it needs to be somewhere in the 90 percentile range in order to get herd immunity. And that is the only way that she's going to be protected. Otherwise, she ends up living a life away from everybody, having to constantly protect, having to constantly have people get tested around her in order to even interact because she feels so unsafe. And I thought that was a really helpful conversation because, you know, we're always focused in on what does it do for me? What about what does it do for your family members? What does it do for the society as a whole? Ginny, you were sharing a story with me that I thought was interesting too. Do you want to share it with the group?
Sure. Actually, a couple points along those lines. I was just reading this morning of a neighbor in our area who wrote on our neighborhood blog, and she was afraid to go into the grocery store. She was immune compromised and noticed that going into a store at a certain hour, she ran into more people that were unmasked. So she was really struggling with how she's going to handle that. She was saying, do I need to go back to picking up groceries and such? So I thought that was an interesting point there. And then something that has just touched me more personally in the family situation, because we always have Thanksgiving down at my brother's house of family and his kids and their spouses all gather. But this year they're going to continue to cancel it. They did last year, of course, with COVID and nobody vaccinated. But this year he also chose to cancel it. A couple of reasons. One of the potential attendees was going to be immune compromised. He's got bladder cancer and is going through treatment for that. But in addition, I have a niece-in-law who is still unvaccinated. Everybody else in the family is vaccinated, but I think my brother was out wanting to point or single her out in the group to send out a general email and saying we're not going to have Thanksgiving this year. And it's interesting because in her family, her husband, my nephew, is vaccinated and her two sons are vaccinated. And I remember talking with her in June or so about it. And, you know, we were all getting our vaccines at that point. And she said she was still reluctant because, you know, it hadn't been authorized or was experimental at that point. And so that was one of her concerns, and the long-term effects, like Bob talked about some of the reasons. So even though it's been fully authorized, I think she's still in a holding pattern and has held fast to those feelings and is not getting vaccinated yet. So, you know, it's going to be sad that we won't still have our in-person Thanksgiving.
Any other stories to share of experiences that you can relate to? You know, I was thinking about doing this, well, I'm planning on doing this retirement get-together in person, and I'm having to even struggle with the words that I put on the invite, whether or not to say fully vaccinated only individuals can come, or whether to say, you know, if you're not vaccinated, please only attend the Zoom meeting. You know, it's like, it gets really tricky around the wording on doing something like that. So it's something that I'm struggling with as well. But, you know, I think we all will encounter sooner or later these circumstances. I went into PCC of all places and ran into two people that did not wear any mask. Everybody else was masked. And one of them was with their daughter. And I was tempted to say something, and instead I maintained a 10-foot distance and kept away from them as far as I could for social distancing. So anyway, I just wanted to see if anybody else wanted to speak up, share about that. Okay. Steve, you're on mute. Did you want to say something?
I was debating whether to talk or not. Well, I find it really interesting, the whole thing with Aaron Rodgers and
Oh yeah,
that really they really value, their independence and to make their own decisions, and then they, I was talking with a nurse yesterday, and how they're seeking advice from people like Joe Rogan, as opposed to the Department of Health, or the legitimate people that really understand these things. And it just, I don't know, it's just very baffling. Yeah. But yeah, people are putting more weight on, I thought that was a really good point. People are putting more weight on some naturopath or Joe Rogan or Tucker Carlson than people like Fauci or whatever, because they're getting so undermined by.
Well, it seems to be the most common question I have is, how do you even talk to these people? And so what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and give people some tools and techniques using motivational interviewing that will help you go down the path of having a conversation with that person, establishing a partnership with that person, a relationship, be it a family member to a family member, or a relationship between a patient and a provider. But being a family member, you might be able to facilitate having a good conversation with their provider if you go in with them to an appointment, or you might recommend a provider that is skilled at having these conversations. But I'm concerned that not all clinicians have that skill level that they need to in order to have these conversations. Medicine has become sort of a productivity-oriented process where if a person says, no, I don't want the vaccination, the conversation ends there. There's no time for exploration. And, there are certain conversations that we have in medicine that need to occur, particularly around end-of-life care conversations, because they're not going to have any choice to have the conversation later. They really need to have sometimes that conversation now. And for some people, that may be true with the vaccination process. So timing is everything. We have something that Terry helped name was, and I still use it today, is the ethics trifecta. It's doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason. And I've moved that motto over from where we commonly use it at the VA. It's actually taken place. It's actually moved forward quite a bit. It's used in many conversations at the VA now. And I want to have it employed because it really is poignant in centering your attention as to how and what to do and why you're doing it. So with that being said, I want to move to the next slide. And I use this slide in many of the presentations because it's where we should really focus our attention, is starting in the center and moving outward. We will not have as much success trying to get the people on the far right or the far left without getting the majority of the populace involved in these conversations and thought processes in the center. So the best thing that we can do to influence this process is to move from the center outward, is in my opinion. This is just a screen capture of our main webpage. And this, by the way, is the button for every invite. And this was an old screen capture because it's got voting ethics, but that's the one on ranked choice voting. We strongly support ranked choice voting. And this is the URL. And now it's time for question and answers. Do you guys have any questions or concerns or thoughts about this process? Okay.
So,
Well,
Dave,
actually, I was going to ask a question, David. You
Yes.
mentioned motivational interviewing. I don't know if there's an example you can give on how to approach this, with
Yeah.
the vaccine. I mean, how would a conversation like that occur, and what would
So
be stated?
let me share with you this one slide, because this is actually a good example of where it was used properly. When somebody says, I really don't know what's even in these vaccines, is a statement of their lack of confidence that it's implying that we don't know what's in these vaccines. And the way that the clinician can go about doing that is first by indicating that they have some information that they can share with the person. And they're also acknowledging having these types of questions is very normal. So you're developing the relationship right then and there. And then you're asking for permission. Can I share with you what I know about what's in these vaccines? So in order to build that trusting relationship, you indicate that you might be able to have something to share with them, and acknowledge their feelings, and then ask for permission as to what to move forward. There's many ways of doing motivational interviewing. I used to use it as a means for reflection. And so in voc rehab, I used to have to deal with homeless veterans that would continually lose employment. And I would ask them, what have you learned, or how can you reflect back on what worked well and what did not work so well in that circumstance? With vaccine hesitancy, it's a very finite conversation because you're focusing in on things that we actually do know, that science has demonstrated. We have the best example of numbers indicating the efficacy of these vaccines of just about any drug that's ever been produced, because we've had so many millions of people take the vaccine. So we have very strong data indicating that there's a very low chance of something happening that's going to go wrong. But we still need to acknowledge that there's still something that can go wrong. And so there's always a risk, and the risk needs to be taken into context with their disease process or their medical status, even their age. There's different things that occur with different people and different age groups. Younger people have a tendency to have a higher reaction because of their hyperimmunity response to vaccines, whereas older people, it's like, I've seen this before and I'm not going to hyperreact to this. So anyways, those are some ideas about motivational interviewing. Does that explain a little bit of it?
Yeah, to some degree. I guess I'm a little skeptical how well that's going to work. I do think the aspect that Bob mentioned earlier about the impact on society has not been stated as much, and maybe appealing to that in talking to people about, we're trying to help, as Pence even put in the beginning, save grandma, or, these immune compromised people that really are doing the best they can. But, if you don't get vaccinated, you're more of a risk to them. That kind of thing might be even more helpful, I don't know, than motivational interviewing, but I guess time will tell.
I'm not, motivational interviewing is just a way of having the conversation. It is not the solution, nor is the societal impact the solution to resolving it. I think both can work hand in hand. They're two different side-by-side concepts. So I think what the article should do, what the guide should do, is to give some examples in addition to this one that would give people talking points in order to know how to go down the road for that conversation. And we could theoretically have a conversation that would talk about societal impact. And I think that would be a really good thing to add into the journal article. Other thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I'd like to add something. It seems to me that you know, one of the major important aspects of motivational interviewing is the fact that it tries to avoid polarization.
Mhm.
So, you know, so one doesn't quickly go into one's corner about you're wrong, I'm right. That's faulty information, you know, obtained through your you know, your bubble versus, you know, what I get from my bubble. So it's meant to be a respectful way of creating space to talk about it without ending up in corners, you know, and digging your heels in.
Well stated, Bob.
One issue that I think's been underaddressed is the potential long-term impacts of the vaccine. So, you know, we see, you know, it's clear the short term, but there's people, you know, even, you know, like Bill Maher, you know, someone that I, you know, fairly agree with a lot of times, but he's hesitant of getting like a booster shot, you know, and he says, well, he'll bring up some other things too. People will bring up that, well, I have really good immunity, and he'll bring that up. Where the way I think of it is I see people that have really good immune systems that have, you know, that have gotten sick from COVID and died. So I don't think that's a really good rationale. So I think those are two things that need to be addressed, is that, you know, just because you have good immunity, it's still a risk. And can we make the case that there a long-term whatever is unlikely for whatever reason? What's the logic around that?
Yeah, good points.
I think we're still going to end up with a problem, which is, you know, how people address probabilities.
Yeah.
You know, because you can talk about, you know, 98% of people, blah, 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 you know, but another person can come back and go, well, I have a friend, you know, do the classic Kahneman and Tversky problems with heuristics and not understanding probabilities, you know, and basically, you know, the most outrageous case becomes a representative case.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, people don't deal with probabilities correctly without a little training.
Yeah, this is your thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I sent David a while ago. I mean, I could do it myself, but a colleague of mine did an analysis, and he's very there's a lot of big libertarians in the decision analysis community, so they want to make their own decisions because it kind of aligns with but anyways, he went through the analysis and he said, for me it made sense. And so you know, yeah, so there done that kind of analysis. And
I thought that was an interesting thing. We should post that to the PEP website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
This is Terry. I wanted to add to the conversation and just, I think to me, motivational interviewing, there's the lack of judgment. I think Bob said it, you know, it's the having a respectful conversation. I, as a nurse licensed in Washington State, Washington's Department of Health has sent out numerous emails with webinars for licensed nurses to giving tools and tips and examples on how to have conversations with your neighbors, with your family members, with people in your community, your patients, because the nurses and doctors hold a trusted position, and making sure that healthcare professionals were equipped to engage in those types of conversations. I would say that the other thing that to me that seems to be one of the biggest disappointments for me about the COVID vaccination is it's becoming so political, and you know, having I don't know, news media kind of underscore that political divide, the difference between red states and blue states. And now, you know, the people in the red states, I think I just read this article from the New York Times about how much, if you live in a red state, how much you're more likely to die of COVID than if you were in a blue state. And I don't know, I just, you know, I heard this article on the radio when they were talking about, you know, back when polio was something in America, when polio affected Americans, everyone got the polio vaccine, and it was brand new. I mean, it's you know, it's brand new, and everyone got the polio vaccine, not only because for themselves, but they got it they felt it was their duty as an American to protect other Americans. And it's really so it's really sad and disappointing that we're at the state where the COVID vaccines are so political. And then I think that's where people are digging in their heels, because they feel betrayed if they, you know, they succumb to, I don't know, it's like they're a failure, or they're not as a staunch, you know, Republican if they get the vaccine.
Yep. Well, I think that's what we're trying to go down the road, to explore different mechanisms to change that narrative. And I really like the idea about capitalizing on the societal impact. And let's see what we could do to build that into a conversation along with motivational interviewing, so that people realize, oh, well, maybe this shot isn't just about me. And I carefully read the 3 informed consents that I got when I got my 3 shots. I got 2 of them at the VA and another one in the community. And none of them mentioned societal impact. And I think that should be an important part about societal impact. Why are we even suggesting that you get the vaccine? Well, I think everybody wants to reach herd immunity, but many people don't even make that connection, that herd immunity will equate to enough people being vaccinated and having that immunity to prevent the spread, as well as to prevent the virus from mutating. Because the more that we could suppress it, just like with any autoimmune disease in an individual, the more that we could suppress it in society, the less opportunity it has to mutate and the less opportunity it has to spread.
I wanted to just kind of build on what you just said, Terry. Yeah, so think about, like, a lot of people are making this decision based, instead of on good decision-making principles, they're doing it based on which tribe they're in and to be part of that tribe. So if you could get them, if you can maybe like switch them somehow to say, okay, forget about what other people are doing. Let's figure out what the best decision for you is, and then present that logic. And societal, absolutely, so that's part of it, is the whole society impact too. That could be a big improvement. Yeah.
Well, that's what we will try to include in the publication. If it does get published to the Hastings report, it will have a nice wide audience and a very good targeted audience, because it will be people in ethics and medicine that will be reading that type of publication. And so therefore, we definitely need to include that as a key element. And so we'll need to figure out how to blend and interweave perhaps motivational interviewing into that process. And maybe even developing some informed consent forms for people to use, or for organizations to use, and proposing those forms as the form and the standardized process of having a conversation. So in my estimation, we should have informed consents that actually guide the conversation, you know, point A, point B, so on. So I think that there's an opportunity. So, all right. So anyway, any other, I did want to, here's Steve's comment, but I did want to share with everybody that I'm going to be doing my end of career, my end of career report on my retirement day, which my first day of retirement is 1/3/22. And I'm going to invite you all to attend my event at up at Blakely Hall in the Highlands. And it's going to be a summary of my career from 1980 to 2022, but I'm also going to be acknowledging all of those people that I've really enjoyed working with and all of the things that I've learned from them. I'm going to be, I have some track batons that I'm going to be literally handing to people for the 6 different people that are taking over my different roles and responsibilities. And I plan to put it in a little wooden stand that they don't know about or anything. They don't even know about the batons yet. So that will be fun. And then we'll put words of wisdom in one end of the baton and the secret location of the shared drive folders in which they need to know about on the other end of the baton. So I plan to have a lot of fun with this. And I look forward to, if you guys can attend, would be great. And if you can't attend in person, that would be fine to attend on Zoom. So any other comments for the good of the group? All right. Well, I wanted to thank everybody for attending. This was pretty wonderful. And we have this recorded so we can post it to the website, because there were about 6 different people that asked to see a recording because they can't make it tonight. And so we will be able to work on that. All right. Bob, your comment, unpacking values with motivational interviewing. I missed the rest of that. You want to share?
Yeah, it says they help people move away from tribal thinking.
Right, right.
Well, values is important to making decisions. So once you start focusing on values, you start making better decisions.
Right. And maybe that should be in the intro paragraph. We need to think about the shift from tribalism towards community, and shift that thinking from the onset of the introduction in the article. So great thoughts. And so I'm looking forward, and I'm welcoming all of you to contribute to this article. Bob and I are getting sort of the general structure together, and we look forward to getting that produced, even getting a draft copy out and putting it online. So thanks everybody for your participation. And I think we probably won't have a meeting until January. I like having it on these holidays. So maybe Independence Day, MLK Day, we had one last year. It was 10 days after the insurrection, I think. So it was very timely, and who knows what's going to happen on this anniversary of the insurrection. You know, I'm very worried about the direction our society is going, particularly on the right wing. So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a good evening.
Thanks.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. Thanks,
Bye.
Bob. Everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.